Hello and welcome. This is Andy Vining, reading my mother's diaries, and this is September and October 1950, episode 18. So welcome back to Hiltonbury Farm, where by September of 1950, the great excitement of harvest was easing, though no one on a farm ever really says work is over. Only that one season gives way to another, and autumn came that year almost like a long turning of the page, with sunshine one moment and rain lashing the windows the next. Thrashing tackle machines rattling in the yard, and leaves were beginning to fall almost unnoticed, drifting into the lanes falling from the trees. Yet September opened with Easter Carnival, and what a great event that was. Jennifer on her new pony, dressed as an Arab for the carnival, looking splendid and solemn all at once, and then she won first prize. How proud we all were. Processions, laughter, bunting, children dancing everywhere. Then we all went off by bus, except Jennifer, to the Southampton Stadium for the jumping. Terrific excitement. And even we entered the donkey derby ourselves, but we had no luck there. That evening was spent with the Deans, Parkers and Beatons, all gathered at Hiltonbury, and somehow the kitchen became a party. Voices over one another, tea becoming supper, supper becoming laughter, and one felt summer had not quite gone. The very next day, rain came down in sheets, a very black day. And from there on, September seemed forever wavering between brightness and wet, just as farming life itself was wavering too, because while village life carried on, John was still deep in the harvest tale, fighting the weather. But we were thrashing, always thrashing, the machines at work, dust in the air when the rain allowed us, straw flying, engines chugging, bales of straw building into ricks, and sacks of corn stacking in the cart shed. Men shouting over the din, and always the race to get the grain safely in, because rain worried him. It always did. A shower at the wrong moment could sour a whole day's efforts, and sheets were always kept waiting to cover over the thrashing tackle. And there were many anxious glances skyward. Yet, alongside, there was Andrew, preparing to leave for his new school, and that gave the month a quiet ache beneath all its gaiety. Trips to Southampton for school things, then trip to Salisbury to Wilton's for his school uniform. 6 pairs of socks, blankets washed, clothes altered, labels sewn, buttons tightened. Packing everything into his tin trunk with A.R. Vining in large writing on the lid. The repacking to make everything fit in. Mothers know that sort of work, done with busy hands and a heavy heart, trying not to show it. Then, on the 13th of September, Andrew was taken to his new school, St Probus, Manor Road in Salisbury. He didn't seem too upset about it. In fact, he seemed quite excited, and it was a great day for him. But somehow it was a great wrench for me. He seemed quite happy, which was a comfort. Though one comes home from such days feeling a room has altered, the house sounded different without him. Even with the girls going up a class at school and life rushing on. Andrew's weekly letters from school became treasures. Everyone read and reread about how life was, and there was a request for toys that we sent to him immediately. Meanwhile, life at Hiltonbury refused melancholy. There was too much happening. Anfield gymkhana with Jennifer winning again, Romsey show, football at the Dell, and Danny Kaye at the Flicks. There was a wonderful film, Odette, telling the story of Odette Sampson, a French-born British woman who became one of the most courageous agents as wartime special operations executive. With Anna Neagle as Odette and Trevor Howard as Peter Churchill, it's a quietly powerful film, and stayed with me long after I had seen it. Then Mary and Bill Sinclair arrived for a few days, and there were trips to Hursley to see Norman's beautiful jerseys. It was Joan Beaton's birthday, and we had a small party at their house. We went to see some Dachshund puppies with Mary and Bill, but decided against getting one, although they were beautiful. John was already thinking ahead, because September was not just harvest end, it was autumn, and the sowing was started. Oats over at Flexford and wheat at Ramaley and the far Hillfield. Potatoes and mangels being dug up and stored, potatoes in the cellar, and Mangle's in a huge clamp up by the elm trees above the new cowsheds. And we won second prize in the Romsey Show route competition. Very pleasing. Poor Jennifer was off school for a few days at the end of September with earache, but to cheer us up, more letters arrived from Andrew. And now we move into October 1950, when autumn truly began to settle itself around the farmhouse at Hiltonbury. Not with any great drama at first, but quietly, steadily, as though the year was drawing in its breath before winter. I spent some time helping in the new cowshed as we were moving for the first time into the new parlours and shed, and it was a great step forward with milking machines instead of hand milking. It took a while for the cows to get used to the new system, and we were busy until 5 o'clock in the evening gone, but it all seemed to work out okay in the end. But it got a bit dark. We were working under the teddy lamps, but the steady rhythm of it all, cows coming in, the hum of the machines, and the warmth of the cowshed, and although difficult at first, it would become so familiar that it scarcely needed thinking about. By evening, I found myself alone for once. John was out at Masonic, the children all with friends, Andrew away at school, Uncle George and Auntie Toss away at Standon, so I found myself in a quiet house, which felt rather strange. So I spent a little time icing a birthday cake for the Fulbrooks, taking care over it as one always tried to. The next morning, Monday, brought real excitement. Our first pure Jersey heifer arrived, and she was a beauty. Born out of Hiltonbury dreaming, there is something quite special about a new animal on the farm, particularly one of special breeding and the start of our true Hiltonbury Jersey bloodline. John was so pleased, as you can imagine. It felt rather like a huge step forward, a sign that things were progressing as they should. And we also had another lovely letter from Andrew that day, which cheered me up enormously. He sounded quite happy, which is always a comfort when they're away at school. The rest of the day was full enough, ironing before dinner, and later I went out to cut the front lawn in the afternoon light, while the air still held a little warmth. Winnie Dean came up in the evening, and we had a pleasant time together. During the week, John was at Flexford planting oats, the steady work of autumn sowing well underway now, and I spent the evening quietly darning, a job that never seemed to end, particularly with a house full of children. Betty called round in the morning, bringing bowls and bulbs for the garden, always something to share and to pass on. John had heard that he'd won second prize at the Romsey Show for his roots, and though he could not make a great fuss about it, I knew he was quietly pleased. So I went to the hairdresser's, leaving Heather at the Dean's, and then I returned feeling rather more presentable. That evening the Fulbrook family arrived to collect the cake I'd made for them. It was a jolly gathering, with much chatter and laughter filling the house. Bob, Bunty and the family were back at Beechcroft for a while, and John was out at Flexford all day drilling, so I spent some time in the garden trying to keep things in order before the colder weather set in. That evening we went to Cyril Fulbrook's 21st birthday dance at the Ritchie Hall, and it was, I must say, a very, very good evening indeed, full of music, dancing and that cheerful sense of village life at its very best. John was still drilling wheat at Flexford, and Joan came on up in the afternoon, and we went for a walk together, picking clothes down at the Camel's Hump. Later, John and I went out together to see The Gondoliers, a light, amusing Gilbert and Sullivan film, but it was good fun. We went into Beechcroft on the way home to see the Millers, and they confirmed that they were definitely not going back to India. What a relief. Saturday saw John off to the football, while Marjorie and Malcolm West called in. I did some gardening, and in the evening we walked down to the Dean's for supper, ending the night with another game of gin rummy. There was some more excitement, a small but important moment. The first pullet's eggs. There's always something rather satisfying about that, the beginning of a new laying season. And Mr. Cross brought a beautiful bunch of chrysanthemums in for me, and that brightened up the kitchen wonderfully. We lit the fire in the dining room that evening, the first proper fire of the season, and I sat writing letters, one to Andrew, with that comforting autumn feeling settling in. The following week passed in much the same steady mixture of work and small pleasures. There were wash days, ironing before tea, visits to the pictures, and one evening with the Mannings to see the wooden horse. followed by grilled bacon back at the house, which made it all rather nice. Then there was Andrew's parcels to send off, calls at Mother's, dancing at the hall, and John off to Crowmore meetings, and another Jersey heifer arrived, number 2. I baked one morning, had visitors to tea, and the house filled again with friends, Bet, Fred, Mary, Ann Miller, while John went off to Chandlersford Cricket Club meeting. There were walks out with Joan and the dogs, odd mending, and one evening spent making knickers, which sounds rather more industrial than it felt at the time. Midway through the month, the days were still remarkably fine, though not always good for drying, and life continued at its gentle, busy pace. John went to football in the lodge. There were visits from friends. One long night when John, Bob and Ben turned up late, we ended up driving Ben back to Havant, returning home at 2 o'clock in the morning. The sort of night always leaves one feeling rather the worse for wear the next day when one has to be up so early. There were apples to be picked, milking to help with, and mending in the evenings. And then there were the little outings that lifted things. A trip to see Annie get your gun, which I thoroughly enjoyed, followed by tea at the Dean's. Towards the end of October, the air began to turn cooler. The girls were off early for netball practice one morning, and I spent time in the garden again, going up to the village to buy Joan a card for Anne Leslie's for their anniversary. There was a dance at the Winchester Guild Hall, young farmers, which was good fun, and afterwards we gathered in the kitchen for tea, as always. A trip into Southampton followed, shopping for the girls, boots, gloves, socks, all a necessity as the colder weather approached. I felt a cold coming on myself and sensibly went to bed early. On Sunday was a busy cooking morning, and Joan and Les came up, meaning only to look around, but of course they stayed to tea. I spent a part of the day making socks, a never-ending task in a house like ours. The last week of October had its quieter moments. There was gardening, ironing, cutting out a little check skirt for Heather, and writing again, of course, to Andrew. We returned a cot to the Dean's and had a good laugh over dancing that evening, though poor Smudge the cat was not well, which worried us. There were the ordinary days, a rabbit taken down to Dean's for dinner, coffee shared, gardening in the afternoon, and Jennifer off to the dentist. And then Thursday the 26th came, a day out of the ordinary. We set off to London early, leaving the children at Dean's, and went by Jones's coach to the Dairy Show in London. It was a most enjoyable day, with dinner afterwards at the Strand Palace, and then on to see Carousel, which was really good. We stopped for fish and chips on the way home, and felt it had been a thoroughly happy outing. But on the return home we found poor Smudge had died, and that quite took a shine off everything. The days that followed were quieter, trips to the village, Christmas crackers bought early, a visit to Mother at Beechcroft and sewing for Heather, a beautiful frosty morning on the Saturday, and a trip into Southampton again, and an evening spent dozing by the fire. The last Sunday of the month was fine again, and we spent the morning gardening, before taking a short ride on Smoky with the children, which was very good fun. Tea at the Dean's followed, and a game of table tennis. And so we came to the end of October. There was ironing still to be done, of course, darning in the evenings, and John busy at Flexford with the potatoes, the mangles, and the drilling. And on the Friday night we went to the hall for dancing once more, calling in at friends' houses along the way, though the fog had come down very thick by then. Later I telephoned St Probus, and was told Andrew could come home for half-term on Thursday, and that gave us all something to look forward to. And that was October 1950, a month of steady work, small pleasures, and a quiet drawing in of the year. This is Andy Vining saying thank you for listening to my Mother's Diaries.